So if you're not a fan of the words, peak fiction, goat, raw, fire, click off of the video.
Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down for your third and final video of the day. As promised, I have slaughtered your sub boxes. Thank you so much for tuning in, supporting what we're doing here. A shout out to my editors, Josh and Lockmort, who have worked really hard while I'm balancing Defining Duke and all this other content I'm working on to make this possible. One thing I was working on today that I really wanted to get to all of you tonight was my Starfield gameplay breakdown, going frame by frame across everything that we saw across the 15 minutes of gameplay. Of course, that's going to take a lot longer because we got way more than I ever expected. And I want to make sure I do it right. So I wanted to take some time, and instead of forcing it out tonight, we'll put it out tomorrow when it's ready, when it's done, and I'll move the conversation that we're having now, which was going to be tomorrow, up to today to just have an honest conversation about everything we saw with Starfield. As you saw earlier today, I posted my raw reactions, my emotions all out there. Oh my God, there's the dinosaurs, dude! I was tearing up, my heart was racing, I was cheering, screaming. At a moment, I kind of went down to earth and then came back up. There was a lot there. And now that the emotions are not riding high, I'm kind of exhausted. I can just have a normal Zen conversation about Starfield. So if you're into that type of stuff or news and discussions on Starfield, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing, and a big thank you again to all of you for supporting everything we're doing here. I really do appreciate it. So let's talk about Starfield. Now, in the act of balancing things out, what I wanted to start off with for this conversation was some of the cons. We will talk about the pros and everything that I loved when I saw Starfield, but I do want to start off with some things that I'm feeling critical of at this moment in time. The first one, and you can even see it in my most emotional state, man, a BGS Matty reveal. Nothing absorbs me more in my emotional state than that. Nothing makes me lose more control of rational thought than a BGS gameplay reveal. And so I knew that gunplay wasn't looking too sharp when in that moment I went, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. That was something that I was not crazy about. It looked rough, like rougher than Fallout 4 type rough. And the only line of defense I'll draw as a professional BGS stan and shill here is what we saw in the opening moments of the gameplay, where I thought the gunplay did look rough because in other parts it looked better, not good, but better, was we're fighting level 1 and 2 enemies, so these are starter weapons, and I kind of equate that to the Fallout 4 pipe pistol. It's like, okay, that's probably not the weapon I'd show off if I wanted the gunplay to look good, because the pipe pistol looks like crap, plays like crap, feels like crap. And then you go to something like Le Fusil Terrible, the combat shotgun, the unique one you get, and this thing's like popping you back, you're shooting, the gore's everywhere, the game feels a lot better, and it feels like the gunplay is controlling a lot better. So what I was thinking for Starfield really was that maybe as you get deeper in the game, it will feel better. As you modify the weapons like you would in Fallout 4, it'll start to feel better, it'll look better. But right now, the gunplay has me a little uneasy. And that's something that hopefully with the time they're spending in extra development, they can iron out. That was one of the first things I felt pretty critical about. One thing I've seen the entire internet point and laugh at Bethesda about, and look, a lot of people are going to say I'm bending over backwards for them. I don't get it. But they're trying to use No Man's Sky comparisons as slander. Like, haha, you look like No Man's Sky. But to me, as someone who played No Man's Sky and played it recently, this is a game that I feel has become great. It's really delivering on some of the original promises it made. And it feels like there's still parts of it really missing. And Starfield is the next step of No Man's Sky. This vision that took years to be achieved. And they're sort of doing it from the onset, but with much, much more at its heart. The NPCs, the dialogue, the character backgrounds, the traits, the design of the worlds being more handcrafted, something I didn't like about No Man's Sky. And yes, there are moments that are clearly very similar to No Man's Sky. Stuff like mining the rock with a little laser gun. Bethesda certainly wasn't shy about their inspiration, and I think that's okay. I'm not trying to defend them, but artists take inspiration from other artists all the time. They're taking inspiration clearly from No Man's Sky and I'd say Mass Effect and evolving those formulas. To me, Starfield looks really ambitious, and it's why it's earned my respect. I was going in excited, but I wasn't going in expected to have my socks blown off, and they did just that. I was plenty happy with what I saw, but as I kept going back, there were little things that kept sticking out to me that I went, that looks really good. And we'll talk about some of that. But I just want to say, I noticed that critique. I can't say I align with it as a bit of slander. If anything, it's a compliment because Bethesda's taken that formula and made it much better. And, again, Hello Games is a great developer. They lied a lot at launch, but they've really improved the game. And I think Bethesda took that and is creating the ultimate space RPG possibly. And in a world without much Mass Effect, that's really exciting. Of course, we have Legendary Edition, but new Mass Effect content, it's really, really exciting to see. Other stuff that left me concerned. Frame rate. There were a couple of moments where the frame rate dipped and it had some 30 FPS energy. Wasn't crazy about this. I think they were showing this one on quality mode and the game did look graphically much better. But this was even when, again, going back to the rock mining situation where you were using the laser to get some resources, I saw that and went, why did the frame rate drop there? That seems like so inconsequential to the game's performance, but don't know what's going on underneath the hood. This is something that always worries me, the bugs, the performance. Bethesda Game Studios is known in a bad way for those types of things. And the lack of polish has always been the kiss of death for them. Just take a look at Fallout 76. It speaks for itself. So yeah, when I saw the frame rate start dipping in what is supposed to be a presentation of the game in its best possible state where you can edit around these things, you can try to figure things out to remove those little speed bumps to make this game look as good as possible, and they're still in there, that's when I get worried because I'm like, they had the opportunity to really hold back, figure something out, and they still showed that. But it wasn't like it was constantly like, no, it wasn't dropping frames consistently. It's just in certain instances, you could see it dip below 30, and I thought that looked weak because otherwise, what's interesting is this game to me, I probably should have said this at the front because I know a lot of people are going to think I'm just being negative, but this game to me feels like finally we're looking at a game that is next gen. We've seen games kick the dirt off their feet of the previous gen consoles. Let's take Gotham Knights, for example. Gotham Knights, I think, looks okay, but it doesn't look next gen. To me, Starfield and Elden Ring are in that company of next gen. And Starfield, with its openness and its plethora of systems, I think truly feels next generation. Taking the things that existed in their previous games, evolving them, adding new systems, and having it really become this be-all video game, reaching further and wider than they ever had before, and actually showing something that I forgot what it's like when Bethesda Game Studios has ambition. The feeling I got with this was like with Skyrim. Not Fallout 4. Yes, I know the one most of you know me for, and certainly not 76. Skyrim. That was the most hyped I can remember I ever was next to Fallout 4 for a Bethesda Game Studios video game. The difference was with Skyrim, I think they delivered in spades. So I just can't help but be excited at the ambition that we're seeing here. Another thing that concerned me that is on the ambition front, 1,000 plus planets. This could be the moment of the Todd Howard quote that goes down in infamy, the 16 times the detail, the it just works. This could be that moment. It's the quote from Todd that everyone has latched to. And I get it. One thing I know as someone who's studied Bethesda Game Studios for a while is in their older games, and even to this day, they procedurally generate the terrain and then build on top of it. And what this means is that for those 1,000 planets, they're not handcrafting each and every single one of them, but the terrain is procedurally generated and they're building on top of it. Now, when I was doing my breakdown, I do want to highlight this here in this video because it is important to the conversation. I was looking at when they were doing the outpost section, the settlement building mode in Starfield. And you can see that when you bring up your scanner, it tells you how many things you have to discover in these worlds, in these planets, these moons. And this one planet you had landed on had like 9 out of 9 fauna and nothing else to discover. And you saw the player character place their outpost marker and started building on top of it. Now, what this means is clearly there are going to be planets that are designed for outpost building. Much like in Fallout 4, there were locations clearly designed for settlements. What I'm interested to find out is because of how quickly they breezed over it, outpost building could very well become this side thing, much like Fallout 4's settlement building should have been a side thing that all is growing towards something, right? With Fallout 4, it was like, don't you like building? Don't you like resource collecting? Here you go. With this one, it kind of reminds me of like the settlement mods from New Vegas, where It feels like you can just plant a flag anywhere, and you can assign NPCs to all these different things in your settlement, and they're farming resources for you that you can use to go to the crafting station they showed, where you can make, there was like food, chemicals, there was weaponry, there was equipment, and so on and so forth. And so I think this can amount to something that's much more meaningful in a side area, like I think it should. So that's something that does remain to be seen on the 1,000 planet front. How many of these are outpost planets? How many of these are just empty? That's the other thing. I can't fathom all of these planets being quest filled and having tons of places and dungeons to explore. We didn't see a dungeon. Technically, we did see a dungeon, if you will, if you want to include like the opening planet they showed, or I'm sorry, the moon that they showed. And when you went into this little hideout where the space pirates were and you cleaned it out, that's technically a dungeon. One thing I didn't see though in that dungeon was a lot of like environmental interactivity. So it's something worth keeping an eye out for. But to me, those are kind of the base level concerns: performance, gunplay, and then the 1,000 planets. And the reason why those concerns aren't taking over is, as I said kind of in the middle of this video, is everything else they've done has really, to me, delivered. It's really hit hard, right? Because I look at something like the ship combat and the ship controls and the customization of the ship, and I was blown away. I was like, this is the part of the game that I totally thought was going to be weak. It was going to look terrible. It was going to be the weakest point in the game. And somehow the gunplay looked weakest, and the actual ship combat looked great. And the customization is like a thing out of a Star Wars fan's dream, to make this clunky little spaceship and take off with it and go up into the stars and fight space pirates and then land on planets. This is like taking the Mass Effect formula and taking Star Wars and just evolving it. And that's why my excitement absolutely trumps any concerns I have. I look at things that they have existing in this game that are calling back to past Bethesda Game Studios games. The backgrounds, the traits. This is what we've been waiting for. And they even show in the game them responding based off your background. Like, oh, I heard you were a chef. I'm like, dude, I just have been waiting for them to do this for so long. And I'm still processing that, because it feels like those days were so far behind us that Bethesda Game Studios was dead. Like, we saw a snippet of them with Far Harbor, and I thought that was it. That RPG side of Bethesda Game Studios with Fallout 4 and with especially 76 was dead. But you hear the callbacks, you see the traits, very Fallout-inspired character building system. You see the perk trees, and we'll see how deep the skills go and how the skilling up works. It, again, reminds me a lot of Oblivion. So you look at those systems that now exist. You look at the conversations, things that we know about a lot in Bethesda games, and how they've evolved those to feel more next-gen. The facial animations look so much better. They look so much more lifelike. That was one thing I couldn't get over, right? In Fallout 4, you're usually looking at someone from like this far out, just barely reading their facial expressions, and they look like they got weird mouths that kind of talk like this, like they're marionettes. And that's the thing in the past. It's like taking the Oblivion dialogue and how it zooms in on their face, a little bit like maybe Outer Worlds for a more modern example, and evolving that. I'm like, this looks so much better than what they've done. And when you combine that with the known BGS exploration, where even in Fallout 76, the exploration of the worlds is fun, it's good, it's enjoyable even. I just cannot help but be excited for Starfield on its scope, its ambition. Yeah, I have concerns, but this game really, really looks good. And it reminds me again of how I felt when I go back to the PS4 generation. And when we were waiting to hop into that with the Xbox One, what was the first game I saw that really looked next gen? And for me, it didn't deliver. But what was the feeling I got where I went, that looks like nothing I've seen before? And it was Destiny 1 when that was debuting, and the shared world experience and the loot that was there. And it was Bungie, it was a new IP. There was a lot of unknown around it. And we all know how Bungie went with Destiny 1. So try to stop there. We'll cut it off there where things got nasty. It's that feeling of the unknown. It's that feeling of like, oh, there's nothing quite like this. That's really pushing me on for Starfield. And again, I'll remain critical like I have in this video. but they're catching a much more mature Matty with this reveal, right? Like, I look back to my Fallout 4 reveal, and let's be honest, I was 17, 18 years old, losing my shit as a little kid, and it was an exciting time, and I still, like, you know, that early gameplay showing of the gunplay was really what made me go, oh God, even in my most hyped state, and they still managed to gradually win me over. It's just something with their games. They just look so good. So across the board, I'm really pleased with what I saw with Starfield. And I do have a list of cons and things I'm worried about, but, you know, my read on the situation is like, I have faith. You can call that foolish, and I'm not asking you to join me on that, but I have faith that they might do something special here. So the only thing I'll say in conclusion, Bethesda, learn from what happened with Xbox and Halo Infinite. Hold on to this thing until it's ready. You cannot launch this. You must nail this. And if you do nail this, it will pay off in a mighty big way because this game looks special. So that's all I've got to say about Starfield. Now that I've come down to earth. What do you feel about the game? Please do fire away. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.